So let's move on to, this is just a picture that I really like. The other problem, which is a problem maybe more of us face that we're more aware of, is that, so right now, today, there's the pandemic, there was the vote in the House today, there is winter, all these other things, and our regular stuff, we have to go to work, take care of our kids. And so we're getting new information hitting us all the time, and we get very fatigued. And so remember, what is comfortable is easier to do. And so to remember to check ourselves is hard. And so we have to also remember that sometimes we have to kind of step back a bit and do that. What this does is, this picture is saying that our brain is affected by all of these different things about who we are, but it's also affected by all the things that are coming at us. And so we need to be pretty gentle with ourselves and with other people. A lot of times we think that other person just doesn't pay attention or they don't want to learn. Well, there are many things that inhibit us from accepting new information. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is that the words that we read matter. So one of the first things I learned in graduate school in technical writing is the whole difficulty of, and I don't know how many of you have experienced this. So let's say you enter into a new field and suddenly everybody's using acronyms that you don't know what the acronym is. So when I worked at the Boeing company, the acronym AP meant airplane. Kind of makes sense, right? But when I went to work at Tektronix and I was a manager, AP meant accounting period. Who knew? And so we all have bubbles that we live in based on our experience in the area that we work in. And so that's the first thing to understand, that sometimes if we use jargon or we don't understand the words, we need to go back and find out what the assumption is behind the word, because sometimes words can be defined differently. When I went to work at Tektronix and was writing a technical manual, the programmer had used invocation that was how the software started. And I said, well, you mean this is a religious thing? And they said, no, it wasn't a religious thing. It had to do with how we invoke the software. And so we need to ask questions in order to clarify what words mean. The other thing is, one of the big keys when you're reading information is comparative terms. The best way forward is, this is a low choice. This is a good choice or a bad choice. What's the definition of good or bad in that case? And so again, you can ask about that. So inquiring about what the words mean, inquiring either audibly or just thinking as you're reading something. Well, I don't know what that means in this situation. I need to go look that word up. What do they mean by good and bad? So it's important to look at that. Jargon, we've talked about that. Weasel words, if you're reading an article or listening to something, they say phrases like researchers think, but there's no citation. So you can't go and look at the research you know personally. Well, what researchers and who said it and what was their background? We all know. And then the other thing is, there's all kinds of ways that words can be offensive. And the same word that wasn't offensive 3 years ago is offensive today because we understand things different or in a context that's different. Has anybody run into that where suddenly a word that they've always used is no longer valid? Yeah. So I'm going to give you an example, and this is not to be offensive, but when I was a kid, one of the things we said to each other was, no way, Jose. Well, now that's not something I should really say because there was an implication around that word. Does that make sense? And so again, words are used to make that happen. Okay, this was a really great class that I took. It was an online class. It's available through the State University of New York and the University of Hong Kong. It's a digital literacy class. It had, I don't know, 6 modules, and you watched lots of videos about it. In fact, the video that I recommended for this class when we started, the one from John Oliver about local journalism, that link came from this class. In this class, it talked about how journalists look at different words. And there's 3 types of truth in journalism. There's the truth, the event as it actually happened. So let's talk about this for a second. I'm going to stop sharing. So let's talk about the event that happened on January 6th. Do any of us know the complete truth about what happened on January 6th? No. We know what we could see on the videos. We know what's been reported, but we do not know the entire truth because we do not have that encompassing vision. So that's one version of truth. Does that make sense? Okay. The second kind of truth that happens is journalistic truth, which is the best obtainable truth on a given day. So a lot of people in the COVID crisis have said, well, you know, they really got the stuff about masks wrong at the beginning. Or why didn't we know this at the beginning? Well, it's an ongoing thing. We learn more things, and so the truth moves forward. And so it's the best truth you can get on that particular day from that particular reporter. And then there's scientific truth. And scientific truth is a statement of probability proportional to the evidence. So right now, there's a very high probability that gravity exists, at least as far as we know scientifically. I'm using something that's pretty, and we know pretty much that the world is round as opposed to flat, although the number of people who belong to the Flat Earth Society has increased over the past few years, which we're not talking about conspiracy theories here. These are the 3 types of truth that journalists use. And then there are the characteristics of reliable information. And this is really important. So verification. So if your news source doesn't verify, in other words, the investigative process that they use to assess, confirm, and weigh evidence, then it may not be a good source of news. How independent are they? How independent are they of control, influence, or support from other parties? And do they take direct accountability for what they publish? By name, for truthfulness and reliability. And so as you look at different outlets of news, and we have lots of different things, we don't just have the traditional media of television stations and newspapers, we have pundits, we have people who are independently publishing. But these characteristics, if somebody says they're a journalist, these still exist. And it allows us to make a decision, take action, or share responsibility with others. So I think that's an important point. There's a wonderful new organization started at the University of Washington called the Center for Informed Public. It started with these 2 professors in one department under callingbullshit.org. You can watch their 1 credit, 1 quarter class on YouTube. It's 77 minute videos or so. You can also get all of their content. And if you don't want to do all of that, you can go to an 18-minute TED Talk called Drowning in Bullshit. And their point, though, is to think more as you consume, share less, because we all are part of the problem. And they also did a nice interview with KLXY in Spokane, and this is the link to confronting misinformation. And so these links are going to be available. And as I said, this is an overview. So, but one of the important things from their website, which I wanted to share with you, is this is an Italian who is in their field of fact checking for science, Brandolini's bullshit asymmetry principle. The amount of energy necessary to refute bullshit is in an order of magnitude bigger than it is to produce it. So let's think about that for a second. In other words, if I send something out that's misinformation or disinformation and it goes viral, Is my correction of that going to hit all the places that it went? No. And so as consumers of news, when we share something on the internet, on Facebook, on Twitter, or with our partner on the telephone, or in an letter to the editor, it just goes all the way around the planet. And so this means that we have a responsibility as responsible citizens to try to make sure that the information we share is as accurate as we can take forward.